right, Matt. You've looked at the schedule. You've got a few historical notes to pass along, but also looking at the schedule, which of course is paramount in trying to determine, okay, this USC team is still a ways away from joining the elite of college football, but maybe if they can patchwork again the defense and put some playmakers together with Caleb Williams, they could see themselves in the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, and I think this clearly establishes USC as the Pac-12 favorite, and here's the historical context behind that. Now, some people will say, well, USC is going to go 9-0 in the Pac-12. No, but if you're 8-1 in the Pac-12, that almost always means you're winning your division and you're eventually being Pac-12 champion. Get this, the Pac-12, as you know, Mark, began in 2011 with the additions of Utah and Colorado. So 2010 was the last year of the Pac-10 conference. In 2010, Chip Kelly's Oregon team went 9-0 in the Pac-10. Since the Pac-12 began in 2011, not one team has gone 9-0 in the 9-game Pac-12 conference schedule. 2014 Oregon, the great team under Heisman Trophy winner Marcus Mariota, went 8-1. Arizona tripped up Oregon in the regular season. Oregon then got revenge against Arizona in that season's Pac-12 championship game. So going 9-0 in the Pac-12, I mean, as much as I've talked down the Pac-12 over the past several minutes, it remains that having a 9-game league schedule instead of 8 has made it very hard to run the table in that conference. Even the greatest teams, even 2016 Washington did not go 9-0. Sam Darnold and USC beat the Huskies, even though Washington made the playoff that year under Chris Peterson. So I don't think USC is likely to go 9-0, if only because no Pac-12 team has gone 9-0 yet. But I think USC's chances now of going 8-1 in the Pac-12 go way up, because the key 2-game combination for USC on this schedule is the road trips to Oregon State or Corvallis, which tripped up Pete Carroll's teams. We know that, and also Utah. The big game. I think USC's chances of at least getting a split in that Oregon State Utah combination, that's the gateway to an 8-1 Pac-12 record, because USC once again doesn't play Oregon or Washington on the schedule this year. So Oregon State is clearly the toughest Pac-12 North road trip, and Utah is the toughest Pac-12 South road trip. And so as long as USC gets away with a split in those games, the home games are frankly a piece of cake. Home games should not be remotely threatening to this USC team. So, now that you have Caleb Williams, it's really hard to see him going 0-2 in that Corvallis Salt Lake City double. And so, if USC does not go at least 8-1 and hit that target, which has historically identified a Pac-12 champion, I will be very surprised. And some people will say, okay, wait a minute. What if USC wins at Oregon State but loses at Utah? So that fair point. And I would just say that, it's going to be hard for Utah to go 9-0 as well. I mean, Utah is going to lose at least one game along the way. And so as long as USC puts up that 8-1 marker, you force Utah in the event to not only beat USC, but then to win 7 other games in the league to get to that 8-1 mark. If Utah loses twice, Utah beating USC won't be enough to get the Utes the Pac-12 South championship and likely the overall Pac-12 championship, because USC and Utah are the 2 best teams. I don't think there's much debate about that. I mean, Oregon, I think, is in the conversation, but we saw last year just how big the gulf was between the Ducks and the Utes in the Pac-12. So you have to place Utah ahead of Oregon. And I think with Caleb Williams, it's definitely a USC-Utah race. Whoever wins the South is likely to then win the Pac-12 title game in Las Vegas. And let's remind ourselves that Utah had a home field advantage over Oregon in Las Vegas. Now that the Pac-12 championship game has been moved from Levi's Stadium in the Bay Area, which was kind of more of a Pac-12 North friendly venue with Pac-12 North style soggy, wet weather. Now you move that down to Las Vegas. The Pac-12 South, which this was just the Pac-12 South's second Pac-12 championship win over the North since the Pac-12 title game started in 2011. The North dominated the 2010s. The Pac-12 South now is poised to dominate the Pac-12 championship game in the 2020s. So you put all of those historical factors and details together, USC is definitely, in my mind, the Pac-12 favorite over Utah.
USC has dates against Rice and Fresno State at home in weeks 1 and 3. And then, of course, Notre Dame. That game's going to be at home to conclude the season. But in regards to the Pac-12 and those 9 games, there's a date at Stanford in week 2, traditional matchup early in the season against the Cardinal on the road. And then back into Pac-12 play starting week 4 at Oregon State, Arizona State, Washington State, at Utah, bye week before Arizona on the road, Cal, Colorado, at UCLA before the Notre Dame game. So if I'm looking at that correctly, they miss Oregon and Washington in the North Division. There's always 2 teams that each team of the Pac-12 misses. 11 opponents, possible opponents, 9-game conference schedules. So they missed 2 opponents. Washington, Oregon, not on USC's 22 schedule.
Yeah, so to not have to go to either Eugene or Seattle in this transition year for Lincoln Riley, it works out great for USC, and that's why I highlighted the Oregon State and Utah road trips. Getting a split means USC is extremely likely to go 8-1 in the Pac-12. And again, if you go 8-1 in the Pac-12, well, that really limits the margin of error for every team you're competing against.